Shalom Aleichem. How are you?
Morning, morning.
We're going back after a little bit of an interlude when we discussed Asher bara Elokim lasos to the subject of Tosefes, and we have this kuntrus here, which is called Tosefes Shabbos v'Yontiv Choveres Aleph. And the last thing that we discussed a while ago was on page Chaf Aleph, and that is the Taz. So by way of introduction, you know that a lot of the poskim have written about when to begin Ma'ariv on the night of Shavuos. And they insist that we wait. We do not recite Ma'ariv early on the night of Shavuos, which would be the 50th day of the Omer, and that's because, in a sense, we'd be cutting down the 49th day of the Omer. So that means that, in a sense, we have a halachic contradiction that's sort of written in stone between the Omer, which requires Tmimos, and Tosefes Yontiv, which requires that we begin Shavuos earlier than nightfall. Because from the perspective of Tmimos, we want to make sure that the entire 49th day is counted as a whole, whereas from the perspective of the mitzvah of Kabbalas Tosefes Yontiv, we're going to establish Shavuos as the 50th day when we're still in the 49th day of the Omer. And in so doing, we are sort of like whittling down the 49th day of the Omer. Now, what we'd like to do is create an analogy. And we're going to discuss a similar situation in which, paradoxically, when we fulfill the mitzvah of Tosefes, we are, in a sense, forfeiting the mitzvah that would have applied the day before. The example is Shmini Atzeres. And when we makabel Shmini Atzeres early, through the mitzvah of Tosefes, then in a sense we're whittling down and cutting down the mitzvah of Yeshiva B'Sukkah. And the reason for that is because you cannot have Shmini Atzeres and the mitzvah of Sukkah at the same time. The transition between the Sukkah and the Bayis, as far as Achilu is concerned, is that moment of time when Sukkot ends, meaning the seventh day of Sukkot terminates, and Shmini Atzeres begins. But oddly enough, by accepting Shmini Atzeres early, we are cutting into Sukkot. And the one who addresses this question is first the Maharshal, and then following suit, the Taz. So we're turning back the clock to a great controversy that took place 5 centuries ago. The Maharshal, Rav Shlomo Luria, wrote about this issue of Kabbalas Shmini Atzeres with regard to the mitzvah of Sukkah in his Tshuvos. After the Tshuva was written, some 10 years later or so, he died. The Taz, when he penned his commentary on Orach Chaim, in this case, Hilchos Lulav, Siman Tov Reish Samaches, he quotes the Maharshal in the Maharshal's Tshuva and disagrees with the Maharshal. Now, I don't want to be cynical, but it could be that the Maharshal had died, and therefore the Taz felt, like now's the time to get him, because the Maharshal could not defend himself against the very harsh arguments and words that the Taz uses against the Maharshal. So we're not going to have time now to go through every word in this very long Taz. But what I'd like to do is highlight some of the text, because I like to teach from the text. And you'll see the pointer on your right side, and he says, Kosav Rashal, Rav Shalom B'tshuva, Shera Haga, fine, we can shorten that. Shalohaya Ochel B'knisas Yom Shmini Atzeres Ad Alayla, that he postponed his Seudah of Leil Shmini Atzeres until Laila, until after, let's call it Seis HaKochavim. He would not allow, which we normally do in the case of a Yontif, after Tosefes, Kabbalah's Tosefes Yontif, to start Yesuda earlier. It could be as early as Plag HaMincha. So let's say Plag HaMincha is an hour and a quarter before Mincha. Add to that between here and Seis HaKochavim, which in Chutz La'aretz could be as long as 40 minutes. Here in Eretz Yisrael, it's usually less than 20 minutes, but nevertheless, you add it all together, you talk about a period of time of close to 2 hours. And during that 2-hour slot, argues the Maharshal, one should not eat. Why? Because if he eats, and he was Makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres, then from the perspective of Shmini Atzeres, where does he eat? In the house. From the perspective of the seventh day of Sukkot, where does he eat? In the Sukkah. He can't have his cake and eat it too, literally, and he's got to decide one of the other. And therefore, the Rashal says he shouldn't eat at all. You've now attached a 2-hour period of time in the transition between Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres in which he's not allowed to eat. Let's go over it one more time. If he eats, then he's stuck with an impossible stira, a contradiction in terms, because he's pulled in 2 different directions. Sukkot, as far as it's still the 7th day, it's before sunset, before it says, pulls him into the Sukkah. Shmini Atzeres pulls him out of the Sukkah. So the best idea that you can come up with is do not eat. Which, when you think about it, again, this is going to be part of the Taz's attack against the Maharshal. It is very, very paradoxical to say that the Torah sets up halachas, a mitzvah of sukkah, a mitzvah to leave the sukkah and eat a Suda Shmini Atzeres in such a way that there's a stira, and it's inherent in the mitzvah, in the halacha, and the only way of avoiding that stira is simply by not eating for 2 hours. But as I state in Maharshal, the Maharshal is not willing to give up on it. Now the Maharshal introduces another point, and that's called the bracha on the sukkah. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we eat in the sukkah without a bracha. That's not recommended. We should avoid eating sukkah in the sukkah on sukkahs without a bracha. And therefore, says the Maharshal, if we were to be makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres and then go ahead and eat in the sukkah, now according to Maharshal, we have to eat in the sukkah if we eat a suda, because it's still the 7th day of Sukkot. Shivas Yomim Teshru B'Sukkos. But then you're going to have to make a bracha on the sukkah. Well, guess what? That bracha on sukkah is called a Tarte D'Sasser. And where do we know this from? And this would be relevant to most of you guys, not to me and not to Bruce, but if you're in Chutz La'aretz, on a Yontif Sheni Shel Golios, what you have is that the 8th day of Sukkot is a Sfeika D'Yoma. You don't know whether it's the 7th day or it's the 8th day.
They'll just have
Back
to
in the day, you may remember,
the suffix.
thousands of years ago, the Shluchim didn't get there on time, and therefore they're knowing the day l'chumrah in both directions. But the Gemara says, okay, fine. Yisuvi Asvinon, the 8th day of Sukkah, Shmini Atzeres and Chutzotz might be the 7th day, and therefore you have to sit in Sukkah. Otherwise, you're missing out on a possibility, a suffix mitzvah doraisa. But bracha lo mevarchinon, you can't make the bracha. Because if you make the bracha and it turns out that this is the 8th day of Sukkot, meaning Shmini Atzeres, then it's a tarti desastre to make a bracha on the mitzvah of Sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. And Shmini Atzeres pulls us out of the Sukkah, as we said before. So therefore, the Maharshal is of the he's absolutely convinced of his conclusion that once he's makabel Tosefes Yontiv of Shmini Atzeres, he's in a bind. If he eats, he's going to have to eat in the sukkah, but he won't be able to make the bracha. And by eating in the sukkah, he is in a sense violating or detracting from Shmini Atzeres, which pulls him out of the sukkah. He quotes the famous Gemara that in Brachos, the Gemara says that Rav Tzoli shall Erev Shabbos b'Shabbos, shall Shabbos b'Erev Shabbos, and Rav would daven Shmon Esrei for Shabbos on Erev Shabbos. But, says the Maharshal, that doesn't prove that because he was makabel on himself Tosefes Shabbos, that he turned day into night as if it was the night of Shabbos. And he writes, Ein lomar dekeva de Mosif Michol ala Kodesh im kein over hayom ze eno. Nehi de Mosifin bitfila kida ashkechan Rav Tzoli shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos aval lo lashvoso laila. He says, it doesn't mean that because you were makabel on yourself Tosefes Shabbos, therefore it's Lila. It's not Lila. That's ridiculous. It can't be Lila. Shari Kriyash Mashal Arvis, Hoya Omer B'Shaitom. He's going to have to wait for Kriyash Mashal Arvis. And when we have early Shabbos, let's say in the summer months, and we daven the entire davening when it's still light out, we're going to have to recite Kriyash Mashal second time around later on after nightfall. After Tzeis HaKochavim. The reason for that is because his Tosefes Shabbos does not convert Yom into Laila. And B'Shalbacham means B'Laila. That's when you have to recite Kriyat Shema. And as you know, this is exactly what we do in an early Shabbos. You know, we give a bang on the stender there, and we say that don't recite Kriyat Shema before 8:03. You know, make sure that you recite Kriyat Shema again a second time around 8:03, because the first time around you did it only because of Smichos Gula Tefillah, and it was a Tefillah Shabbos. But Tosefes Shabbos does not convert the day into night, and therefore you aren't Yotzei Kriyat Shema. Umishum Hachi. Ein roy lispar omer b'leil Shabbos achar kiddush ad alayla. He asks the following question, which is very similar to what we started with today, and that is, if he was makabel Tosefes Shabbos on Friday, can he count Svira for Shabbos? And the answer is obviously not. Because in Svira you need a new Zman, the next Zman. Let's say you need day 22, we'll call it, and it's not yet day 22. The fact that you were makabel Tosefes Shabbos with all its implications does not make it into day 22. I deliberately said today's day so I didn't get into trouble. He says, he says to sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres is a real problem. That's why the Gemara avoids the bracha. Because, again, as we said before, Shmini Atzeres takes us back into the house. Now, at this point, I'm going to fast forward a little bit to get to the Taz's argument against the Maharshal. He says the following. So we're skipping, I would say, about 6 lines down. Elu divrei harav Rab Shlomo Luria v'af she'ein meshivin es hari liachar moso. He implies that I'm really pulling a fast one here because I'm arguing against the Maharshal after his death. That doesn't give him much of an opportunity to defend his position and counter-argue. Yeah, I don't know, he's trying to be an unav here, so the Taz calls himself a shul, like a little animal, a little fox, Nevertheless, after all the apologetics, achve daiti, I want to express my own opinion. Shedivrei harav, the words of Rab Shlomo Luria and the Maharshal, ma'od tmuim, are very, very difficult. V'ein hadas sovlan. Wow. Do you hear the words of the Taz? He's saying that the human intellect can't even tolerate the words of the Maharshal. The lama gozar tainis bechinam mishas knisas Shmini Atzeres shehi b'bodyon. He says it's very nice that the Maharshal asks us not to eat, and he forbids us from eating. He really establishes a tinus for that period of time that we calculated earlier. It could be as much as a 2-hour period of time. A Atzeres tinus, and mind you, this Atzeres tinus is every year, annually. There'll be a Atzeres tinus for 2 hours after he was makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres. V'hu hechrech. What does he mean, hechrech? He means, well, maybe you'll say that the Maharshal would advocate that we don't be makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres and wait until nightfall, which means you could continue eating in the sukkah, be mekayim the mitzvah doraisa of Shivas Yom Teshuv Sukkos, and then you'll go into Shmini Atzeres b'layla. No. That's not even an option. So Tosefes Michol HaKodesh doraisa. Now, Rabbosai, we're learning the first kuntris. The second kuntris is dedicated to this line that we're reading now in the Taz, who says that Tosefes is doraisa. Major controversy, fireworks in all directions. But in any event, according to the Taz, he's permitted to accept that shita, that Tosefes is doraisa, not just on Yom Kippur, but on any single yontif, Shabbos and yontif. So the Torah is commanding me to accept upon myself Tosefes Shmini Atzeres, which means that I, by definition, according to Torah law, I am in this bind in which the Maharshal is going to be gozer tainus. According to the Maharshal's logic, he has no choice but to fast until nightfall. Minanimna means it's impossible to accept this. Chada first. How is it that nobody until the Maharshal noticed this? The Gemara itself should have told us that there's a steer of an Ehud Bay inherently in the mitzvah of Sukkah versus the mitzvah of Shmini Atzeres, and we can only solve and resolve that contradiction by being gozer tainus. Why didn't the Gemara think of it? Or why didn't one of the Gaonim, Rishonim, Achrone Rishonim, nobody thought about it until we got to the Maharshal. The Maharshal discovered America. Lo avishasku chachamim mizeh. the Varecha Zinon Ditarche Limtzos Takana Yom Shmini Atzeres Leishe V'lo Levarech. We see that the Gemara regarding Yontif Sheni Shel Goliath worked overtime to try to work out the stira between Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres. And therefore, Lo Matzana, why didn't we find any takana liknisas alayla to this period of time after Kabbalah's Tosefes Shmini Atzeres until nightfall? Lahatzil ha'adam mi'iser gadol. They should have suggested some sort of resolution to protect us from violating an iser gadol. Shelo yavo lechol kodem alayla. Ulechol ha'pachos hoya lehem lahazir limtzo takana lahazir osanu bazeh bifrat sherov ha'olamedim yodim vein. The whole world doesn't know about this. The Rabbanan should have guaranteed that the word would get out, and it's hidden away, tucked away in the tshuva in the Maharshal. And furthermore, we don't have the authority, and we should always avoid trying to add another isur that doesn't appear neither in the Shas nor in the Poskim. I was thinking, of course, of the Ashkenazic isur of kidneys, but Enochinami, you'll find that in the Poskim. It could be by poskim, he's not referring to a minhag, he's referring to mikra adin. Keep in mind that the Maharshal's chiddush is mikra adin. He's not talking about a minhag. Visu, and furthermore, the lefi chashash shelo ye also lichnos l'sukkah. Wow. According to you, Maharshal, if you want to be consistent, you would, during that 2-hour period, don't even dream of walking into the sukkah. Because most of the Gedolei Rishonim, the Rif and the Rosh and the Tur Paskin, that when you walk into the sukkah, you have to make a bracha. It was only Rabbeinu Tam who insisted that the Iker Kviyas in sukkah for a bracha of Leishev is when you eat. And then the bracha is chal on L'mafreya to include that which you went into the sukkah. But now, according to Maharshal, we have a problem. Can we go into the sukkah according to those Rishonim who require a bracha of Leishev Basukah, regardless of whether he eats or not? You didn't solve the problem completely by telling me that there's Atzeres Tainis. You should have gone a step further, Maharshal, and tell me, don't you dare enter into the sukkah. Which, by the way, raises the question about Yontif Sheni Shel Golios, because we do eat the meal in the sukkah. I hope so. At least, no, you don't. You're Lubavitch. Okay. So at night, the Gemara paskins that you should eat in the sukkah, but you don't make a bracha. All right.
Minhag of my family.
Olechet lefi minhago. This whole idea of Kabbalah Shmini Atzeres with Tosefes gives me chills up my spine, because this past Shmini Atzeres, I wouldn't want to have given them an extra hour of Shmini Atzeres, if you know what I mean. All right. But that's al piderech hadrush. To also likanes l'sukkah, we should not be allowed to go to sukkah. We also should. The pasko arif arash vatur diyesh levarach al kol pam sheyikanes ba, meaning b'sukkah. Kamosha kosav b'simon tafresh lamed tes. Elish Rabbeinu Tam Pirei sheikar kviyas hi b'achila u'mevarach al achila u'poteres kol advarim mekevin shezeh also lechol b'sukkah b'mei yiftar b'mei shechayav b'knisasam. Yeah, Rabbeinu Tam is saying I'll poter everything with my bracha on achila, but in this case you're not allowed to eat. But if you went into the sukkah, you're chayav in a bracha, and you don't have the bracha later on achila to be poter you for the bracha on knisa l'sukkah. V'sula dvarav, according to the Maharshal, we're going to have this problem any time that Yontif falls on a Friday, because when we eat a Suda on Yontif, we have to add Yalav v'Yovo to bench it. But once he's makabel on himself Tosefes Shabbos, then he's eating a Suda Shabbos, he can't make Yalav Yava. So maybe he should be fasting during that period of time, because if he doesn't fast, he'll get into a problem of having a requirement of Yalav Yava and benching, but he's not allowed to say Yalav Yava because he's already makabel Tosefes Shabbos. So the Maharshal certainly didn't get out of his problem by simply focusing on Shmini Atzeres. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward another 2 lines. He says, "Ube'emes svar shebana ravalov eno kayim klal." The whole fundamental premise and logic on which the Maharshal built his shita, he built a building on a fundamental premise. The foundation itself is incorrect. Eno kayim klal. Again, a very harsh lashon. Tivadai. Now, if you have the same text as I, and you want, this is the part that you want to underline, because this is the new definition of Tosefes Shabbos or Tosefes Yontiv. So you want to look from the bottom of the page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up. I would recommend, if you printed this out, or if you have the kunshas, to underline it, as I did. V'devadai misha mosif michol ala kodesh, who ose al pitzivui torasenu, right? So first of all, as we said earlier, according to Taz, the mitzvah Torah to be makabel Tosefes, you are required to do so. But here's the bomb. Kvar cholaf v'holach mimenu chovas hayom. The obligation of yesterday is completely paka, it's gone. V'havi kemo b'layla. It's as if al pidin is Laila. Umachar mamish. The new day has begun. So notice, Rabbosai, the Taz is not willing to accept that Kabbalas Tosefes is merely Kedusha. It's a Kedusha Sayom. No. It goes way beyond that. It's establishing Ke'ilu Laila, meaning the halachic world and its own mechanism can determine when is Yom and when is Laila. So we're not talking about Kedusha Sayom now. We're talking about Laila Mamish. So that when the Torah says sit in the sukkah for 7 days, it's no longer within the 7 days. Joe?
Is he going so far as to say...
One second, I don't know why I don't hear you. This is, I think, a problem in your computer because...
No, I hear everybody else. Bruce?
Does anybody else hear Joe? You hear
Bruce,
Joe?
you can hear?
Yeah,
So you think it's a problem in my computer then?
Yeah.
Can somebody else unmute themselves and see if I can... Or
David?
maybe turn up the volume, you say?
I hear Joe perfectly
How
and
do I
I
turn
hear
up
you
the
perfectly,
volume?
Rabbi. But I hear nothing from David.
You don't?
Give me a second here.
Oh, now I hear David.
Looking for volume.
I hear breakfast from David.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Nothing
sorry
wrong
for a
with that.
minute. I need a certain... I need to press on a certain place. But let me just first of all...
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to know if he's going to say that this idea that it's actually all right in. We had spoken. The Rav had spoken in the shir beforehand with regards to Tosefes Shabbos that the halachas of being over on an avera was much lighter during Tosefes Shabbos than for the other ones. Is he going to say that that it's not? It's going to be much stronger.
Right. No, you're correct. In other words, even the Taz is going to have to admit that it's not Laila Mamish. I mean, you look out and the sun is still above the horizon. And therefore, it's not the Chomer of Shabbos with a Chiyuv Misa, a Skila, whatever. It's a din that Tosefes Shabbos is considered like Laila. And therefore, when the Torah commands you to be makabel on yourself, Tosefes, in this case, Shmini Atzeres, the Torah means to tell you that now it's Laila, and you are alleviated of the mitzvah of Sukkah. All
So
right.
he's still making a differentiation.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, B'li Neder, after we finish this year, I'll try to work on the volume business. I just don't know where it is on this screen. I think it's on a different screen. In any event, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, you hear me. And it says the following. Umashe kosav harav listar zeh me'ahid rav tzoli shel Shabbos be'erev Shabbos v'yamamtin im kriyat shmat al laila v'chein bi omer tmini al gaver rabba di ime. I'm amazed that such a great rabbi like the Maharshal, Shari Nahura, who just spreads light. Ma chashav b'zeh to karv zel zeh. There's no analogy whatsoever. The Kriyat Shema v'omer. Oh, this might answer your question, Joe. The Kriyat Shema v'omer is mana b'layla. V'lo miyachtim ibod yom. V'lasos shelo kedina. V'shvil masher kibol Shabbos. So again, as far as the Kedushas Hayom and the Mitzvahs Hayom are concerned that are generated by the sanctity of the day, you could say that Tosefes Yontif engenders a Kedushas Hayom of Shmini Atzeres that requires of you to eat in the house, and the Kedushas Hayom of Sukkot that requires you to eat in the Sukkah is completely gone, and that's what Tosefes Shmini Atzeres accomplishes, Havile Kelayla. But as far as the Omer is concerned, or as far as Kriyat Shema is concerned, there it depends on Yom and Laila Mamish, not on Kedushas HaYom V'Laila. And therefore, if you reminded yourself after Kabbalah's Tosefes Shabbos that you did not count Svira, then the Taz would still admit that you can count Svira.
It's funny
The previous day.
that's funny because really, just like I can understand Shema because Shema is based on it's a set thing, but really the Omer is really connected, like Sukkot is connected to Shmini Atzeres. The Omer is really connected to Shavuos. So if
Right.
it isn't this,
No,
it's got to
but
be
he's
that.
making one point, the Taz, that Omer depends on Yom and Laila. Every day has to be counted, the day until the end of the day, and the day ends with Laila. Kriyat Shema also. The day ends with Laila, and that which you read during the day, you were Yotze yesterday's Kriyat Shema. But it's not yet Laila. So even though you Makabel Tosefes Shabbos, that's as far as Kedush Hayom, but it's not yet Laila. Sukkah, like eating inside the house, in the case of Shmini Atzeres, all that depends upon the Kedush Hayom. The Torah gave you the ability to make that transition in the Kedush Hayom from Kedush Hayom of Sukkot to Kedush Hayom of Shmini Atzeres by being makabel on yourself, Tosefes Shmini Atzeres. And therefore it's like Laila. So for example, I was thinking out loud, what would the Taz argue in the case of a Hefsek Tara? She was makabel on herself Tosefes Shabbos. Can she still make a Hefsek Tara? And I would think yes, because she needs Zayin Nikiyim. The beginning of Zayin Nikiyim is with Laila. That which she accepted Kedushas Hayom of Shabbos Mibod Yom while it's still light out, that doesn't make it into Laila, and therefore the Taz could accept and validate her making a Hefsek Tara even after Kabbalah's Tosefes Shabbos. There's just one more point here that I wanted to make. Just a second. Masha ein kein b'chiv sukkah shel fanenu hein mitzad knisa v'hein mitzad achila, whether it means going in or eating. He says B'shosha kibel kedushas yontif shel Shmini Atzeres soser mitzvahs sukkah. Right? Because again, mitzvah sukkah is a function, is a manifestation of Kiddush Hayom, and now he accepted a different Kiddush Hayom, and he engendered the Kiddush Hayom of Shmini Atzeres, and therefore there's no mitzvah of sukkah whatsoever. He'll eat his meal without fasting, no need to fast in the house. V'yesh lo yecholes lasoskein, and he can accept upon himself Kabbalas Shmini Atzeres Mivod, and not only that, he's Mekayim Mitzvah when he does that, and therefore Havi Leikmolad. Hey, he adds an interesting play on words. You know, we have in the Gemara, in Ksubas and elsewhere, Pesha Asar hu Pesha Hitir, and he applies that here. He says HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Pesha Asar. He told us you're not allowed to eat outside the sukkah. V'hu HaPesha Hitir, when he commanded us to accept Tosefes, Shmini Atzeres Mivod Yom, he now was matir the Isra Achila Chutz L'Sukkah. I thought that was very sharp. So again, our conclusion is that according to the Taz, we basically could be makil on both ends of the spectrum. We can makil and allow him to eat in the house. He doesn't have to worry about the sukkah. We can be makil and allow him to continue to be sofer, to count the omer, even though he was makabel Tosefes Shabbos. And we can be makil and allow her to make a hefsek tara, even if she was makabeles Tosefes Shabbos. On the other hand, Kuliyavalo pligi, that with regard to Kriyat Shema, we need Laila. And although the Taz is willing to say that because the Tosefes Shmini Atzeres, it's Ke'ilu Laila, but nevertheless it's not Laila Mamish, and the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer depends on Laila Mamish. The mitzvah of Kriyat Shema depends on Laila Mamish. And therefore Tosefes would not undermine the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema of the previous day or the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer of the previous day, nor would it engender a mitzvah of Sfiras Omer of this day or a mitzvah of Kriyat Shema of this night, because for that we say we need Laila Mamish. Now, in the Yeshiva Gedol of Lakewood, he adds something very interesting here, which I wanted to study with you. If you have that gray box on the bottom of the page. And he says the following. He says, B'das hataz, shenischalef hayom, vavi kmo laila, v'alkein potem yisuk. Yesh la'ayin im kavanoso shayom nischalef lechol anogea l'dinei Torah. V'shuv lo havi yemei sukkos. V'imkein gam mitzvos hatluyos bizman, efshal l'kayim bizman atosefes. Like, let's say, for example, you want to eat a Suda Shabbos in the summertime, Mibod Yom, the sun is still shining, you accept it upon yourself to Tosefes Shabbos, can you be Mekayim the mitzvah of Seudas Shabbos? And that was, if you recall, the Shita of the Rimi Kurbil that we quoted at the very beginning. Let me just remind us. And that was on page Yud, and that was the Rimi Kurbil quoted in Tosefes Dimaskal Chetechshach on Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Beis. And the Rimi Kurbil allows you to eat a Sudas Yontif or Shabbos after Tosefes, even Mibod Yom. V'lo kasha kushas agrach. right? So the Grach wanted to understand why in the case of Korban Pesach and all the mitzvahs that are equated to Korban Pesach, like matzah, mora, dalit kosos, why do we need to quote the pasuk, the achlus habasa b'layla hazeh? Forget about b'layla hazeh. Typically, we could derive that conclusion from the fact that it's not yet tesvav. But in Lakewood, apparently they felt that according to the Taz, it's already tesvav. I wouldn't go that far. I think he means kill Lila, but it's not really Lila. And the proof of the pudding is that he writes, V'chein ba'omer, he has to wait till nightfall for the Omer, like Kriyat Shema. And the Taz says that doesn't prove the Maharshal, meaning that it's not yet Lila, because there I think he says it would depend upon Lila. So that was the impression that I had. Now let's just quickly take a look at a few other comments here. For example, on page Chaf Beis, he quotes the Taz and the Maharshal, and these seem to be very consistent. And that is, do you have to eat a kizayis of Seudah on Leil Shabbos after nightfall? And the Maharshal says yes. Shalo nog shenog shalo lecho b'layla b'leil Shabbos had halayla v'li nire came in the Tosefes michol al kodesh udoraisa al kain yotza shaper afilu gomar sudosa kodem halayla. So the Taz is making you can finish your whole Suda, because again the mitzvah of Shabbos, of Kedusha Shabbos, engenders the mitzvah of Suda, and with Kabbalas Tosefes Shabbos, it's Kelayla Mamish, eat your Suda Gesundheit. We move on to the Magen Avram on page Chaf Gimel, and the Magen Avram in Orach Chaim Simon, Reish Samach Al Hilchos Shabbos writes, Tzarich lahosif michol hakodesh v'havi mitzvah seidoraisa. And if it's a mitzvah seidoraisa, the Taz is correct for arguing against the Maharshal that it must be the Torah says that you've terminated Sukkot and you've entered into Shmini Atzeres. Now we turn to the bottom of page Chaf Dalid. He has a Mishnah Berurah in Simon Reish Samach Aleph. Tzarich lahosif bein b'knisaso bein b'yitziaso. And here we go on to page Chaf Hey. K'de'isa lekamon v'ein al hazman hazeh lo lav lo kores ki im mitzvah aseh me'atorah. That's what you were referring to before, Joe, that Tosefes is only a mitzvah aseh, or call it an iser aseh, but it's certainly not a chiyuv kores. Okay, then we take a look on page Chaf Vav, another Mishnah Berurah, and here we're looking at Simon Reish Samach Zayin. Just one second. Where does the word velechol come from? One second. I'm trying to. Where's the word velechol? Can anybody? Oh, there it is. It's on the top line of the page. Yeah. So the Machaber allows you to eat your Suda immediately after you have Makabel Tosefes. And the Mishnah Berurah writes, Hatam, the reason for this is came in the Kibbutz of Tosefes, Shabbos, for Osam Michol HaKodesh, Nechshav, Kishabbos, Linyin Zeh, Diyochel HaKadesh, v'lechol miyad. She doesn't have to wait till nightfall. But then he writes that although the Machaber allows you to finish his Suda mibod yom, yesh cholkim v'sovrim she'izoyer limshoch sudaso ad alayla, stretch out his Suda until nightfall, v'yochel kizayis balayla. V'taimon, why do you have to eat a kizayis balayla? The kevon, that gimel sudas yalfida mimashikosav echlu hayom. Torah repeats itself 3 times hayom, so it's totally in the day. The day begins at nightfall. Well, it's not yet nightfall. Is be'inin she'ikayim osam b'yom. So all 3 sudas will be on the Yom of Shabbos, and the Yom of Shabbos is inaugurated by Laila. I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this, Mishnah Berurah, and that we should be machmir and stretch the Suda out into Laila. Now we turn to page Chav Zayin in Hilchas Lulav Simon Tofresh Samach Ches, and we're talking about Yontav Sheni Shel Golios. The Machaber Paskins Ubechutz Laaretz Ochlim B'Sukkah B'Layla Ubiyom Nipneishu Safek Shvi. So we don't know what is the status of the 8th day of Sukkot in Chutz Laaretz. Is it really the 7th day or is it the 8th day? And therefore, l'chumra, we have to sit in Sukkah both at night and during the day, but ein mevarach al shiyasa. We do not make a bracha leishe b'sukkah because that would be a tarti sasre in case it's Shmini Atzeres. And if you look at the Mishnah Berurah number Dalet on the left column, he says, "Came of the Yom Shmini Atzeres hu yefshel avruche b'sukkah de kashan adodi." It's a stira mineu bei. Im Yom Sukkah hu lav Shmini Atzeres hu. Im Shmini Atzeres hu lav Yom Sukkah hu. Yishvachi avdina lechum. He says that the Achronim accepted the Shita of the Maharshal. Who is this? Yud Aleph. Where is Yud Aleph here? Yud Aleph. Rashal, okay, that we know. Ubach, Ulevush, Elio Rabba, Chemed Moshe, Nar Sholem, Bigdei Yesha. Wow, very impressive Yediyas. Udeloka Taz. Wow. It's unbelievable. He rejects the Taz outright, doesn't even quote the Taz. With the evidence of Natal Yodav Ubirach Hamotzi, he shouldn't have eaten, but he went ahead and he ate. Lo Yivarach Leisha B'Sukkah Kibul Shmini Atzeres B'Tfilos B'Kiddush. On page of Ches, he has the Chidushe Harashba in Rosh Hashanah. Hadami Boilan Hacha the Rabbi Shmuel the Mosid Michol Kodesh Kolomar B'Shvius Minole. Right, so that was the Gemara that we began with all the way at the beginning of this Choveret, which was a Gemara Rosh Hashanah that was looking for a source for Tosefes Shvius. Yamini Mishul D'Chsiv Shabbatchem Kol Makom Shenemer Shvos Atamosa Michol HaKodesh Ikal Medek Maikomi Boile Hamrinan Bereish Perakam Demoid Katan Kroy LeRabbi Akiva Hilchasa LeRabbi Shmuel. So we're going to derive the mitzvah of Tosefes Yom HaShabbos, Yom HaYontif, etc., and even Tosefes Shvius from the pasuk V'nisem es nafshel seichem v'tisha be'erev. So the Rashba's conclusion, which I think we'll pick up as a separate issue, is to be machalik between Tosefes Shabbos and Yontif on the one hand and Tosefes Shvius on the other. And that the Sugya in Moikotin is going to derive Tosefes Shabbos and Yontif from V'nisam es nafshos seichem, whereas the Sugya in Rosh Hashanah is going to derive Tosefes Shvius from a different source, V'charish u'v'chatzer tishbos. Just in the next 4 minutes, I want to share with you something that I saw in Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, if you allow me to do so. And it has to do with Parshas Emor at the very end, where the Torah tells us the story about the blasphemy, the Makalas Hashem, and his punishment. And he develops a fascinating idea, which he finds the roots in a Gemara in Chagiga, that Hashem will often take away the life of a tzaddik in his youth. And, we're living through a period of time here, and I don't want to get too emotional about it, but we're losing young people. And I thought that Reb Chaim Shmulevitz is telling us something that we can perhaps take as divrei nechama, and that is that when Hashem takes the life of a tzaddik in his youth, it's for the benefit of that tzaddik. There are tremendous philosophical, theological repercussions to what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz is saying over here. And he points out that there were tzaddikim who lived a full, long life, and Hashem did not take their lives away prematurely, but there were other tzaddikim where Hashem decided, like, for example, Chanoch, where it says about Chanoch that Hashem took his life prematurely. And it's all within a divine plan. And the Chiddush of Reb Chaim is that he categorizes 2 categories of tzaddikim. And he tries to differentiate and determine which tzaddikim or which kind of tzaddikim will HaKadosh Baruch Hu determine that he'll take their life prematurely, and which will he leave till the end of their lives. And Reb Chaim, in this essay for Parshas Emor, took it upon himself to face this most complicated, as I called it, theological issues. So if any of you have a chance, an opportunity to look in this sefer, it's called Sichot Musar, and they gave it another name now. They called it Sharei Chaim. You see that subtitle. And I'm working on this for hours already, trying to figure out how Reb Chaim reconciles these 2 approaches to the Anhagas HaKadosh Baruch Hu and these 2 categories of tzaddikim. How do you define this category of a tzaddik and this category of a tzaddik? Anyway, let me take this opportunity to thank you very much for being with me and wishing you all a great week and a great Parshas Emor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Hold. I have to fix the sound.